Hello, ladies. Welcome back. I'm Jen. And today I have the wonderful Marie McQueen here with me today from Hot Flush Inc. Sorry, Hot Flash Inc. It's the
Hey,
Australian Flush
it's
Flash.
both. It can be both, yeah, because we're different parts of the world are different things.
Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
And you too. So we recently met on the Menopause Shift Summit, which you were
Thank you.
co-host at. And oh my God, what an amazing job that you and Andrea did putting that all together. Hats off to you. I'm glad it wasn't me.
Wow, that was something where you're like, sure, I'll do it. And then, whoa, that was something else, putting that together. It was really life-changing doing that.
Well, I'm really grateful that you did it because it meant that I got to meet you.
I know it's one of the great things that's come out of it. And even though I'm still incredibly tired from doing it, I'm just reaping all the benefits from all these relationships. It's really cool.
Well, you're not the only one reaping the benefits because I was sitting down going, an award-winning journalist with 25 years of health experience. I wonder how I can use this to my benefit and get you to come on the podcast and talk about research.
Mm.
So I put the suggestion out there that we pick a topic and we each go and find some research and bring it back together where we can have a discussion about what's going on. And you chose dementia. Why did you pick dementia?
Well, it just seems like everyone's getting dementia. It seems like it's all you hear about. One of the things in my journalism career, and I guess in my life, is that I just connect the dots. It's sort of an exhausting thing, but I'm just connecting the dots. And if you're connecting the dots on dementia, all of the things that are creating all the other diseases seem to lead to dementia. And I'm seeing studies regularly of the links to dementia. Every single study mentions movement and exercise. I think that has to have something to do with it. My own aunt has dementia and has had a particular lifestyle that is almost like typical of sort of some of the risk factors for dementia. And then since I've launched Hot Flash Inc. and I've been in this space like solidly for 2 years, but I was researching and paying attention for years before. It just seems more and more and more that the singular focus has become estrogen. And of course, women have the rates of dementia are higher among women. I think it's like 2/3 of dementia cases roughly in the world are women and the rest are men. So I know that it's an easy answer. It's an easy okay, we have estrogen protects the brain, estrogen declines. That must be why we have dementia. We must take hormone replacement therapy, menopause hormone therapy, whatever you want to call it. Ladies, we must do this. We have to protect our brains. And there's just a number of things that bother me about that. There's just a whole host of things that bother me about it. And I have nothing against menopause hormone therapy at all.
So my favorite neurologist is Dr. Dale Bredesen and his
Yes.
fabulous work, The End of Alzheimer's. And I love the way he describes cognitive decline and dementias as being a house with a leaking roof, with having 36 holes in the roof.
Mm-hmm.
When you just go after one thing, if you're just going after estrogen, you're only patching one hole in that roof. I'm sorry, if you've got 35 holes in your roof, you're still leaking. You need to take a multifactorial approach and have a look at so many different angles, not just hitch your ride on one belief on one thing and hope for the best. So I was really excited when you brought up this topic today because I'm like, yes, there's so many other factors we can consider and we can look at, and not all factors are going to be relevant to everyone, but I think it's good that you can at least consider it and say, yes, that's me, or no, that's not. And it's also empowering. It's empowering to know that there are other things that you can do and you can take control of your health to prevent or to delay cognitive issues.
Yes. And of the dementia diagnoses that I'm having in my sphere, this person's mother and this person's mother, there's not a lot you can do. Someone's mother was just diagnosed with dementia and their doctor did say to her, move as much as you can. but you can't, there's only so much you can do. You can't force Dr. Dale Bresident's work on them. You can't, this is horrible when you get a diagnosis and everyone comes at you with a bunch of different things. I can't say I follow these 3 great people on TikTok who are like curing their parents. I can't do that. But Dr. Dale Bresident's work, by the way, like by a hair was going to be in the summit, like by a hair. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. I was so close. But we just couldn't work it out. And I think for next time we could get him back. But his work is so important for us at this age, because we can look at everything he's doing and walk backward and say, okay, what can we do? Right? Like everything he's talking about. And estrogen is hormone therapy is one piece of his entire protocol. But there are so many other factors that are involved, and we can talk about those. And just the past, it just hit me in the last 2 weeks. In my last newsletter, I wrote about 3 studies that were other things that contribute to dementia. And I thought, okay, like this is coming fast and furious now, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There was a study published in Neurology out of Sweden that showed that there's like a 38% higher risk of developing dementia if you have that. And that is 25% of people have non-alcoholic fatty liver apparently. And I mean, I have it. It doesn't have any symptoms really. And so that's one was alcohol. 7 units of alcohol can lead to cognitive decline. That was a big study in out of the UK Biobank. And the other one was underactive thyroid. Underactive thyroid, and that was in Taiwan. And they looked at almost 8,000 people, and they found that people newly diagnosed with dementia had an underactive thyroid, and the risk of developing dementia was even higher when people took thyroid hormone replacement medication. So all of these just, I mean, studies come out and they're bits and pieces, and we have to start paying attention. But in just a week, that research came out, and okay, if your mind's like, oh, I can't pay attention to the clinical studies, Anne-Marie, it's like, okay, but can we acknowledge that with the other body of work, alcohol isn't good for your brain. The things that give you liver problems aren't good for your brain. If you have thyroid problems, pay attention to that. And again, exercise. That's the biggest one.
Somebody at the summit, and I wish I remember who it was talking about the differences at midlife. They were talking about in midlife, we seem to have a lot more memory issues, like brain fog, not so much the dementias and the Alzheimer's. And I love the way she explained it. She was talking about, well, cognitive issues could just be that you're walking in a room and you can't find your keys. Mm-hmm. And that is something that we can work on, that we can change. But dementia is when you don't know what the keys are for.
Mm-hmm. So okay, this is Dr. Sarah McKay. She's Australian. Okay. Yeah, the neuroscientist. So I asked her, how can you tell the difference? Because there is a difference. And what's being all like conflated here on social media is the brain fog associated with perimenopause and menopause, and the cognitive decline associated with dementia. And I don't know really that there's a link that's been between both of those, because there's a book out now, and I'm going to be interviewing her on my podcast, Dr. Luann Brizadine. She wrote a book called The Upgrade. She is a neuroscientist. She talks about how during perimenopause and menopause, your brain goes through an upgrade, that you have a drop in energy by about 25%. That is what is causing the brain fog. That is what is causing the overwhelm and some of those problems. If you follow that school, I mean, I'm not through the book, but what I understand is if you follow that school of thought, which is sort of the biological view of what is actually happening to the brain is going through an upgrade. And after we pass through the transition, we get back to normal levels, and sometimes even better levels. That's her argument. That's why she calls her whole book The Upgrade. And so, yes, we also have these risks for dementia over here, but I think the fear that women are feeling over their brain fog and their cognitive issues in perimenopause is being tied up in this sort of toxic, anxious soup with our fears of developing dementia at much higher rates. And really, I mean, I think that they have something to do with each other, but Dr. Sarah McKay, would say, no, they don't really have anything to do with each other. They're just very scary. It's very scary to not be able to find your keys or to not be able to find words or whatever. But yeah, again, like one is because of a specific hormonal issue. One is because of a myriad of things, but in women is being tied to the hormonal issue. And my fear is always that, and I do know people who have gone on hormone therapy for this reason. My fear is that they're not tackling any of the other lifestyle issues, or they're doing some of these things that we know or fear could be leading to the dementia risk, and thinking, I'm protecting my brain. And maybe they are. Maybe the estrogen will save them. I don't know. I don't really know. And I also know that if you have a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's, it's not necessarily the case that you'll develop it. I mean, Kashif Khan runs the DNA company, and he was talking about that. He said a lot of people are scared to get those tests to see what's in their, what's inside them, basically what sort of little fragments are going to put them at greater risk for that. But he said no, because you can find out and then you can change everything. So it's just the changing everything, Jen, that's the complicated part, right? It's just the everything.
Yes, I agree there.
Mm-hmm.
But it also depends on your motivation. Like if you've got a gene result that wasn't what you wanted, you're going to be more motivated to make the change than if you didn't. Or if you have a family member or a friend who's going through things, then you're more motivated to make the differences so that you don't have to go down that path. And I think that is the difference. Women that are motivated, that want optimal health for as long as possible for them, are going to make the changes, that nothing's going to be too hard, versus someone that has got other priorities. And you and I are here talking about it today because it sounds like it's a priority for us and we want to share the news.
Priority for me. I don't want to be, I don't want someone to have to, I don't want them to have to put Auntie Annie in a home, like, what are we going to do about Auntie Annie? I want to have my brain. There's also in the States, Maria Shriver is a prominent journalist. She was married to Arnold Schwarzenegger. She's a Kennedy. And are you familiar with her? So she's very well known, and she has teamed up with Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who wrote the XX Brain, who has done a lot of work in this field. And interestingly, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, because we know that the research isn't there really tying. The research isn't there saying take hormone therapy to prevent your risk of dementia. It's not. Like a lot of doctors in the UK are saying that it is, but it's not there yet. And the guidance from the North American Menopause Society and other menopause societies, they're not recommending that you take hormone therapy to prevent dementia. But I was listening to Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who is a leader in this field in North America, although she's from somewhere in Europe, and Maria Shriver. They were on this podcast and they were talking about all the things you can do to prevent dementia. And I was struck because hormone therapy, they had 6 things: great relationships, keep challenging your brain, great relationships and connections, keep challenging your brain, make sure you exercise, make sure you like your diet, like a healthy whole food diet. It was a 6-pronged thing that didn't talk about hormone therapy. Was like, then maybe you can explore hormone therapy. And so everyone takes Lisa Mosconi's work and sort of repurposes it for this. I see this a lot on social media, and I think they will find links. Like, I think they will. I think eventually maybe we will take hormone therapy under the guidance of a menopause society for dementia prevention, maybe. But I sure hope everyone keeps doing these other things. I'm really interested in the connection part, and the challenging your brain, because I don't know about you, Jen, but I have a lot of friends who are like, we're retiring. And I'm thinking, what? We're supposed to be retiring? I don't know, I'm supposed to be thinking about retiring, Anyway, that was a lot.
Retirement is not on the cards. It's like signing up for an early decline. It's like, no, I'm going to be active as long as I can be active, physically, mentally, emotionally.
No one prepared me for this. No one prepared me for the retirement talk. Like, I thought it would start in my 60s. I guess it's kind of how I thought menopause would start. I don't know what, I just thought it would be later, and then everything comes before. Anyway, I threw a lot at you, but all of those things are incredibly important, and there's research to back them up. So yeah.
Well, I will tell you about the research I found then.
Yes.
And I found it was one called Diet Associated with Inflammation and Alzheimer's Disease. And this was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's back in 2019. And they started by looking at the blood-brain barrier
Mhm.
and how most people have heard of the blood-brain barrier. They know it's this protective mechanism that hopefully prevents some things from moving through to the brain and allows other things through. But you can get permeability. So just like you might have heard with the gut, how we can get intestinal permeability, sometimes known as leaky gut, which means that the gap junction between the cells are wider and it's allowing things through that shouldn't be through. Same thing can happen with the blood-brain barrier. So we can get permeability there that
Mhm.
allows things through. And they spoke about inflammation
Mhm.
being a cause of, or one of the many potential causes for that. But inflammation can be linked to metabolic syndromes, so blood sugar issues, insulin issues, being overweight. They spoke about dysbiosis and infections, how this can potentially be a cause. I liked that they looked at the dietary factors. And with the dietary factors, what they came up with is the Mediterranean diet being the best one for prevention and for slowing down the rate of decline. So, when
Okay.
you're looking at the Mediterranean diet, you've got quite a good amount of good quality fats. So, you've
Mhm.
got your seafood and your olives. It also has a good amount of fruits and vegetables in there and a moderate amount of animal protein. They found that to be the best kind of diet moving forward. They specifically looked at some key vitamins, in particular B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, and their links with cognition. They looked at the microbiome being a potential cause of other issues with the blood-brain barrier. They were looking at dysbiosis producing LPS or lipopolysaccharides, and these are very inflammatory end products of dysbiosis. So with your microbes, the good ones produce things like, I don't know if you've heard of postbiotics. So you've got
Mhm.
prebiotics feed your probiotics, and your probiotics produce your postbiotics.
Okay.
And butyrate is one of the good beneficial postbiotics, and LPS is one of the detrimental postbiotics by some of the dysbiosis. So they also had a look at the role that played. There was another research article that I was looking at that was looking at the viral biome. So in your microbiome, there's also a subsection of viruses, and
Mhm.
particularly looking at how the herpes virus or these latent viral infections that we have for life. And it's not necessarily that maybe we get cold sores that's the problem. It's the rate of reoccurrence that is a problem that can cause inflammation, and how microbes can get in multiple ways to the brain. So there was another research looking at gingivitis
Mhm.
and infections coming in from the mouth, but you can also get infections coming in from the sinus, from the ears, from the eyes. These all have entry to the brain, so we need to think about what's happening there with the viral load and the microbiome and what we can do to optimize. Um, and this particular one also looked at gluten sensitivity, regardless of whether you have celiac disease or not, that people who are sensitive to gluten or allergic to gluten have an inflammatory response to consuming that food.
Right.
So I really liked that it covered so many things. Yet this
Yeah.
is general naturopathic treatment. It's let's clean up your diet, let's optimize your nutrients, let's assess your microbiome and see what we can do to
And let's
improve
look
things.
inside your mouth because I really, I'm more and more interested in dental care. I went to a biological dentist last year and I had a filling, like a metal filling
Mm.
removed and had a biologic, he looked at everything because they look for inflammation in a way that the regular dentist doesn't always look, or that was the way he explained it to me. And yeah, I mean, you often hear links to it, but no one really explores this in the mainstream. Like you often hear links to the heart problems and problems in your mouth. So it's really, really important. And I was talking to my other dentist and he was saying, you don't think about this, but he said, sometimes I have to tell people like I spot things in the mouth before anyone else. And
Yeah.
he
Well,
sometimes
well, that was mine. I see a holistic dentist, and he actually told me that I think you have sleep apnea. Now, I'm a small framed woman, and most people with sleep apnea are larger frames. But he thinks that using braces as a teenager made my mouth smaller and therefore my airway more narrower. And I went off and got testing. And guess what? I have mild sleep apnea. And that was from the holistic dentist. But one of my other articles that I picked up was clinical and bacterial markers of periodontitis and their association with the incident of all-cause Alzheimer's disease, which was published in 2020 in the Journal of Alzheimer's. So there is definitely a link. You really need to look after your mouth. And if you've never seen a holistic dentist, do it.
there's a lot of people who don't see the dentist. They just
Well,
don't go.
maybe start there with a dentist.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was sitting with someone in my extended family who is a braces doctor. He does braces and orthodontics. And he brought it up, this biological dentistry and what a scam. It's just like those anti-vaxxers. And I was like, it was at Christmas. And I had just been to see this biologic. I thought, okay, I'm just going to be quiet here because come on. It just shows sort of, there's that funny, this is a man who spent his entire life in orthodontics and does not want to hear about biological dentistry. But when you start diving into what their philosophy is and how each tooth is connected to different organs in the body, I mean, the more I learn, the more I just love our beautiful, beautiful bodies. And it's so interesting, Jen, because we talk a lot about disease and it's very easy to get sort of worried and think that we're in big trouble with our toxic soup that we live in. But I also do like to think about how our bodies are really beautiful and they're always trying to get back into balance. And if we just sort of like support them, that's what the kind of work you do. That's the work you do, is you help people get back into balance. And you said something beautiful when we talked before too about hormone therapy. You said it's kind of like starting at the end. And I really, really love that. Like, it's just such a perfect way to describe it. It's starting at the end. And if we have any other problems and we're not finding out what they are, then we're not really getting to the root of what's going on. And this is the time of life where we need to set ourselves up for success, I think, and the rest. But you also sent me a crazy study. Do you want to talk about that one?
So that was actually in the diet associated with inflammation, the first one I mentioned. They were talking about the hygiene hypothesis. Now, you've got to remember that this study was published in 2019, prior to the COVID global pandemic happening. And they were talking about the possibility of the hygiene hypothesis being a possible factor in the exponential increase of Alzheimer's. And that really worries me because of the 2-3 years that we've had since then, with the amount of hand sanitizing and washing and avoiding other people and just trying to be as sterile as possible.
What was the suggestion? Like, what was the mechanism where they would just, did they say? I mean, I know it's probably just that we're absorbing it and then it's, it's going inside our system and crossing the blood-brain barrier.
I've got the article here in front of me. Bear with me 1 second. I just need to find the hygiene hypothesis. So the hygiene hypothesis suggests that the overly hygienic Western lifestyle that includes the use of food additives, the overuse of antibiotics, clean water, and generally high level of sanitation, and blah, blah, blah. So they look at the mechanism being that the T cells don't mature properly. And if your T cells don't mature properly, there goes your immune system. And they're not saying that this is the cause, but they're saying consider this as one of the factors.
Very, very interesting, right? Like this is because I come from, and it's funny because my mom was a nurse and we didn't live in a hyper hygiene house at all. And I'm like, I always joke when I'm dating people, I'm like, I'm a little piglet, but I'm not messy, but like I'll do things
Play
probably
in the
that
dirt. Like I
yeah, or
love
I'll get, yeah, play in the dirt. I don't know. Like all I've read is like, we need these things to have, so our body, so our T cells can mature properly. And if you can't put yourself in it, be the person in the bubble. And yeah. And the other thing is since COVID, we interviewed Chris Layton, who has a company called Air Zones about air quality
I
here.
watched that one.
Yeah. And he was saying, since COVID, it's insane because everyone's when you smell the hand sanitizer, that's you inhaling the hand sanitizer. When you spray a wet surface and then it's dry, that's you have inhaled it immediately. Now, all of those chemicals have gone all over your body and it just makes him sick. And I was just at F45 last night and we have to wash every weight after we use it, which we didn't have to do, before. And I was resentful, Jen, every single one. Like I was sort of, if you looked at me, I was like, like I was kind of just, I don't know. I just thought this is not good for any of us. This is not good for any of us. Me touching the weight after someone touching it exposes me to other people, like all, and I know this is controversial when people talk about COVID and we have to save lives and keep everyone safe from this virus, but the way I have understood it over the years and all my research is that we need people, we need exposure to different people. We need to get our hands dirty. We need, I've even heard people say, if you get organic vegetables, like don't wash them that well, like have some of the dirt on them, like that's extreme, but there's people, I've seen TED Talks from doctors who aren't showering every day on purpose, who work in this field.
Get a pet. If you
Yes,
don't have a pet,
exactly.
get a pet because that will definitely increase your good microbiome. And if you can't have a pet, go to a petting farm or a zoo or somewhere and just touch some animals.
Yes. I was laughing. I had surgery and they said, oh, you need to be away from your cat for 14 days before the surgery. And I was like, I do? I don't really understand this. I've never. And then that's when I started looking into pets and how, yeah, pets are another example. We need to touch people. We need to, it's been a real blow. And so it's scary to think that study was published in 2019 and what's happened then. And I am so bothered by the consumerism that's come up around even before COVID. I was so bothered when I saw the little dangly bottles that you can get for the backpacks and they sell them in the gas stations here and in the stores and the kids have them and they're cool and they've got stickers on them. I was really just bothered by that because it just feels not right.
Well, moving on. the next
It's fun.
The next one sort of links into what we were saying about the dentist, and that is with sleep apnea. And this study was the relationship between obstructive sleep apnea and Alzheimer's, also from the Alzheimer's Journal, this time in 2019. And the mechanisms here was if you have sleep apnea, you have intermittent hypoxia. So we have changes in the amount of oxygen saturation that's going on. We have sleep fragmentation, so changes in our sleep, our REM sleep, our deep sleep, our slow sleep, or the different stages of the sleep cycle, and interthoracic pressure swings, so changes in your cerebral fluid. And that all linked in with sleep apnea being a potential contributing factor towards the development of various dementias and Alzheimer's. But I also think it's a relevant discussion to have today because sleep apnea for the midlife woman can show as night sweats. So if you're wondering whether I need to consider getting a sleep apnea test, if you're only hot at night, like if you're not having hot flushes or hot flashes during the day, if you're only having them during the night, you need to consider what's happening with your sleep. Could you have sleep apnea? Could there be mold in the bedroom? Could there be dust or dust mites in the bedroom? It could be something that's happening with your sleep in your bedroom. The other factor that is generally indicated more for night sweats than hot flushes is stress. So it's purely a cortisol response, a stress response, then you can also get night sweats from that.
Yeah, I think I've been having those lately, but there has been studies into sleep apnea and postmenopausal women, and it's 4.5 times higher, the incidence. So I don't know whether we're developing it. I guess we're developing it during then. That's what one study has found. But
Well, it
also,
could be weight gain. A lot of women are gaining weight during their mid years,
yeah,
and it could be the extra weight
yeah,
having an impact on sleep apnea. I know for me, I was finding I was breathing through my mouth at night,
mhm.
and by training myself to breathe through my nose and to change the way that I'm breathing, so I'm more a nose breather than a mouth breather, that's made a massive difference
Did
for
you
me.
start taping your mouth closed?
I didn't need to. It was more just a conscious decision. But I was going to get the tape, but then COVID hit. I couldn't find it, couldn't get it. So I made it work. But I have no problems with mouth tape as long as there's not full obstruction, or like on nights when you're just stuffed up. Like if you've got a sinus infection, don't mouth tape. You've
Yeah,
got to make sure
yeah.
you can actually breathe through your nose before you tape your mouth.
There's got to, I know there's, I don't have them at hand, but I know there's studies between sleep, and there's a body of research between sleep and dementia and poor sleep and low amounts of sleep. And so of course, sleep apnea would tie into that. So yeah, a sleep apnea test. Maybe I should get that. Maybe I should get a sleep apnea test. I've been taping my mouth closed because I heard that a couple of years ago, and I don't love taping my mouth closed, but I do notice the difference in my rest, how rested I feel, a profound difference in how rested I feel. So I think it's
So
worth it.
there's two ways you can test these days. You can go to a clinic to sleep there the night and be tested, but I actually prefer the home kits. That way you're sleeping in your bed, on your
Mm,
mattress, with your pillow. It's your normal environment.
mm,
And you can do the test at home and then take the machine back the next day, and then they'll generally give you a report within 10 days.
mm.
That's a polysomal machine. In Australia, we rent them through a pharmacy. I
Okay.
know I've had people in the US who've rented one online and got it delivered. So there's different options. You might just have to Google it, but
Mm.
I think it's good to know, because
Yeah.
it's something that you can work on, even if for you it's obstructive. It's totally not to do with how you're breathing. It is that you've got polyps. Maybe you can get your polyps removed, and that reduces your risk of dementia. Or
Yeah.
maybe you do need the CPAC machine.
Yeah.
But if it means you can think, you have energy, sign me up for the CPAC machine if that's going
Yeah.
to help.
Well, I mean, the study that it was a Japanese study that found that women who have severe joint pain and fatigue be tested for sleep apnea. Well, that makes sense. If you have, obviously you're going to have fatigue, but joint pain, if you're not sleeping, you're not restoring and healing your body. You're not doing the restorative work. If you can just feel it. I entered a period of pretty big stress after the summit, just because I had to turn my mind to all my other work, and I started not sleeping, and it was about 10 days, and things just completely crumble. They just crumble. They don't. You just cannot function when you're not getting good sleep. When you can tell when you wake up and how you feel, and you were sort of not in the deep sleep. All those mood, all of the just menopause symptoms. I started having hot flashes and night sweats,
Headaches.
headaches. I get my chest was tight. Like, it's just a cascade. And so, and I'm laughing because I just recorded a solo podcast last week about all the things I did to ruin my sleep. I have really good sleep hygiene, and I just stopped doing all of the things. I started working first thing in the morning, looking at my phone, looking at the computer right until, the end, not going for walks in the morning, not getting morning light, not doing, and then I started doing those things again. And about 3-4 days later, I started sleeping again. So dementia is very, very scary. And, I, as a single woman, I feel, I don't know if you're more scared if you're married, but I feel sort of more scared about stuff like this. But the other thing that heartens me is that there's people like Dale Bredesen and whole summits called The End of Alzheimer's, like whole summits that I haven't had time to watch or sign up
Oh,
for.
I've seen him. He's a fantastic speaker.
people working, not him, a team, like field of forward thinking people working about this. So I don't think a dementia and Alzheimer's diagnosis is the same thing it is these days. If you know the right people and you know the right, the right protocols, and you're following this work and you're willing to try, I don't think it's the same thing that it was. I don't think it's like that movie with Julianne Moore, when she just, I think there's a lot you can do. And I think we've all seen that movie and movies like that, where it's just like, I'm going to literally lose my mind.
I think it was Losing Alice.
Losing Alice. Yeah. That's just it was just a terrifying movie. But, I follow a man on TikTok who I love, who's working with his father, and he's doing all sorts of things. He talks about pregnenolone. He talks about MCT oil. He follows a doctor. Oil. Yeah, he hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Mm-hmm. He follows another doctor. Her name is escaping me, but she had a husband with dementia, and she developed this protocol and brought him back, like has videos of him when he was at his worst and then when he was at his best, and he ended up dying of something else. But isn't that
the ultimate goal though?
Yeah.
To die with it not affecting you, and to be able to remember your loved ones when you say goodbye to them.
Yes. And so even the specter of this is just so terrifying to people. But I don't think if you get a dementia diagnosis, that specter has to be a reality anymore. I'm not sure that it has to be, but like with anything that's ahead of the curve, it's not getting to everyone. Not everyone has heard of it yet, because I said, there's people ending Alzheimer's. I said it to a friend of mine who's a neuroscientist. She said, I don't think there's people ending Alzheimer's. I said, there's a book called The End of Alzheimer's. You just haven't heard of it yet. There's just, And
it's not a new book. I'm just looking for when it was published.
Well, he's done several, but this is 5 years, maybe.
2017.
But don't you find, Jen, that you've been ahead of the curve in the work you do, but don't you find when someone starts to say something like, it doesn't have to be this way, people are like, oh my God, you can't say that. Like, for example, type 2 diabetes can basically be reversed or stopped. No one likes to say you can cure it, but I remember I interviewed a doctor probably 4 years ago for the platform that I run, Live Healthy here in the UAE. And he said, this is pretty controversial. He was doing work to end type 2 diabetes at his clinic in Dubai, all of the things that you do. And I felt a little bit like, ooh, I don't know if this is a bit nerve-wracking for me to run this, but it's been about a decade now, or maybe more. Probably there were doctors doing it before who were doing this, but it was not cool to talk about. It was not cool to talk about the possibility that you don't have to just live with type 2 diabetes. And I feel like this may be similar, that in 10 years, we may be having a very different conversation, or even 5. And even 2 years ago, I didn't know all this stuff. So,
yeah. Well, I remember hearing Dr. Dale say that he really struggled with the Alzheimer's Association because they're looking for one magic pill. And when you do research, you're researching one factor, and that's all you're looking at. That with him saying, well, there's 36 factors. How do you put that into a clinical trial? And no one wanted to give him funding. They were trying to poo-poo him. And he's a revolutionary. Like, it's fantastic that we have humans on this planet like him. I know he's not the only one, but he's just in my sphere. So
he's wonderful.
I recognized him.
He's wonderful. And what happens, the medical and science field is brutal. Absolutely brutal. I took a course to learn how to do a TED Talk with a coach in California, and she's coached some of the top, like she's worked with TED Talks and she's coached some of the top TED Talkers. And she said, look, if you get a TED Talk, you're lucky enough, your most audiences will just be like this, like so excited to see what you have to say. And it's a beautiful audience. She said, except if you're a doctor or a scientist. And then they're like this. And there's just this history in every advancement where it follows a pattern. Someone will step out and say, I'm thinking differently. And then everyone will pile on and discredit them in whatever way that they can. And I'm sure that it's been very difficult for him to go against the mainstream and to go against the societies that are set up to develop this, because everyone wants it to be simple and no one wants to change what they're doing. And there's a million factors that go into it, but we've all worked in places where what we've been doing hasn't been working, but the boss doesn't want to see it and doesn't want to change because the boss thought it up, like it's just it's such human nature. I don't know, but some people call it type 3 diabetes.
Yes.
Right. And that is like, whether you call it type 3 diabetes or not, there's a reason.
So you should just explain that link in case somebody hasn't heard it before.
Well, isn't the link just basically that it stems right back to the insulin resistance that we're developing, and how 1 in 2 people, even in midlife in perimenopause, are of some version of insulin resistant. That's what it is. So it starts back there in that difficulty that our body starts having with processing our glucose. Am I explaining this properly? Yes. So, and if you don't address that and all the factors that enable that to happen, movement is a huge one. I just talked to a nutritionist yesterday and she said, I don't like to get too worried about the foods that we are eating in this time of life. What I like to do is to focus on the movement. So increase the energy demands so that your body becomes like, yeah, you're not eating processed food and dousing yourself in sugar, but you're moving your body. So your body is having bigger energy demands. So that is how you sort of trigger it to become more efficient and maybe pull yourself out of insulin resistance. But if you don't deal with the insulin resistance, then you become pre-diabetic, and then you become diabetic. And then the links are the links to cardiovascular disease and dementia. They're all there. They're all there. And I don't know that enough people take insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, diabetes as seriously as they should. I don't know if enough people, I think it stops there for them. It's like, oh, I don't know. That's the impression I get from sort of, we're in this all the time and we're thinking about it. What do you think?
I think it really depends on the individual, because sugar is so highly addictive. Like, it's more addictive than cocaine. So to want to come off it and to successfully come off it are two different things. And I want to acknowledge that if there's someone out there listening who has struggled with blood sugar roller coaster, but it is possible. And I want to encourage you to give it a go again. And sometimes you just need some supplemental support. So maybe something like chromium or berberine or inositol, or some of these supplements can help support you so that you can get off it, because it's generally the first couple of days that are the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that's normally when most people give up. This hurts too much. My head hurts. My body hurts. What was I doing? I'm going to go and have a cake. That's the easier road. But there are ways like I said, supplemental ways you can support that transition being easier. And movement, going for a walk after a meal. And it can just be like a short 30-minute walk after dinner, which can be a beautiful thing to do, or maybe a walk after lunch can really help to stabilize your blood sugar levels. So there's little things you can do. If you tried it before, please try again. But I do acknowledge it's hard. So I think maybe some people know, but it's just that journey has been too hard, and maybe they need someone to hold their hand. Like, you can got nutritionists, dietitians, naturopaths like myself who can help you, so you don't have to do it alone. But it's
I think when you think if I don't eat sugar, my life will be so boring. If you really depend on sugar, I mean, I have a friend who had arthritis. And again, you have to really watch, because I do not want to be, and I'm sure I am the person who's always saying the things and people are rolling their eyes at, but I said, all that candy you eat, maybe. And then a couple of years later, she stopped eating all the candy, and lo and behold, her arthritis symptoms all but disappeared. And I find a lot of problems that people are having can disappear, like almost disappear, when you stop eating sugar. And the thing is, when you stop eating sugar, like about 20 years ago, I used to struggle on the newsroom when they would bring in like donuts and those horrible slab cakes, like, those just big, horrible slab cakes. And I used to think that there was something wrong with me, because one day I ate 4 donuts. Like, I literally had one donut and then I went back to my desk. I couldn't stop thinking about the donuts, because I do think sugar is addictive. And I think it's addictive, like cocaine might be addictive. Like, you do one line, you might want another line. I don't know, like in the movies,
the research is it's more addictive.
Yeah, I've heard that. So I'd be at my desk, just like unable to work, just the donuts. And one day I had 4, and I felt so horrible, obviously, because you feel so horrible when you have that surge of sugar.
But how did you think afterwards? Like, I'm just thinking of all that brain fog afterwards from that.
And I had another incident with the office Christmas party, which was just like nothing but candies and a chocolate fountain. And I took a cup of chocolate back to my desk and ate and I felt so horrible. And that's when I sort of stopped eating sugar. And then that's when I realized when you don't eat sugar, you don't want sugar. And when someone brings the donuts in, you're like, I am not going down that roller coaster today. I cannot do it. I've got a day, you know, and then you can eat some sugar and see how you feel. And if it's worth it, if it's going to be something awesome, but not a slab cake from Costco. I don't know what you call Costco there, but
And we have Costco here. So,
yeah,
yep.
you know, not like, you know, it's not that hard and the benefits are huge, absolutely huge. You're not on a roller coaster. You don't have to feel like you don't have any willpower because it's beyond you. I mean, I could go eat a donut right now if there was a box of donuts and have the exact same problem. And I don't eat sugar, like, you know, I don't eat like obviously sugary things very often. And when I do, I don't. Even yesterday, I ordered my dinner and the place has these awesome, like clean chocolate chip cookies. And I ordered 2 and I didn't feel well. I just didn't feel well when I was sleeping. It was like, yep. But it's one of those things that seems like crazy people will do if you don't do it, but it's really worth it. It's really worth it to try.
And although I said it's really hard and you struggle initially, I'm talking about day 2, day 3. And then once you're past that, the results come hard and fast. If you want to drop weight, the weight just falls off. If you want better clarity of thought, that comes around. Joint pain disappears,
Pain.
energy goes through the roof. Yeah, and that becomes your new addiction. I want to feel that good.
Yeah. And when you're not living your life like from thing to thing to pick you up, because you know, people end up using those obvious sugar as an energy, right? Like they just end up like my friend who quit sugar because she had a cardio scare and no one loves sugar more than her. And she had kids. So she was always telling herself it was the candy for the kids, but the kids are like, you know, the kids are 17 and 15 and they're athletes. And I don't think they're eating the candy. I think she was the only one in the house and she had the scare and she quit it. And she said, boy, was it ever hard. But she said just that afternoon, she needed that afternoon pickup and she doesn't need it anymore. And the physical pain in your body, it's the difference is night and day because I developed some really bad pain in perimenopause and I went on the Whole30. I went on the Whole30 diet only for pain. I'd had sort of a traumatic experience happen and I think it settled in pain, but I went on the Whole30 diet for that. And I had been sort of creeping back up to my diet wasn't so great. And after about day 10, like none, I had none. So but I want to know your suggestions for if someone's worried about insulin resistance, say me, like what would be your 3 things that you would suggest other than eating sugar, going for walks?
So look at what time you finish eating before you go to bed. So you don't want to be eating and then going to bed straight away. Ideally, you want about a 3-hour gap, at least a 3-hour gap between fork down and head on the pillow.
Okay.
The next thing is looking at when you put your first bite of food in your mouth the next morning. So some people call it intermittent fasting, some people call it time restricted feeding, but as simple as 12 hours. So if I put my fork down at 7, I don't put anything in my mouth the next morning until 7. It's that simple. And it's only, I guess, if you're watching TV or nibbling at night that you would eat between those hours. And that's what we want to get rid of. We want to get rid of those late night nibbles and really give your digestive system that 12-hour break because it's not processing carbohydrates or proteins or fats. It can help to regulate that. So we do find that insulin resistance does improve with just those 2 things, not eating at least 3 hours before you go to bed and not eating again until 12 hours later. And 7 and 7 is what most people do. You might be 8 and 8, you might be 6 and 6. It all just depends on your lifestyle. But that, and you can also look at some nutritional deficiencies because sometimes you're craving things because you're missing things. So chocolate craving can be a magnesium deficiency. So maybe you need to add some more magnesium in. Lysine, which is an amino acid, can also help with blood sugar cravings. Inositol is another amino acid that can help with cravings. I've already mentioned berberine, the herb, and euchromiums.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I follow someone on Instagram, and you have to be careful who you follow, but she said she's the sort of pre-diabetes dietitian, which is a pretty good niche to occupy these days. And she just is always like walking can reduce your risk of diabetes by 50%, walking 30 minutes a day. Imagine, it's just, not only can walking do that, walking can completely change your perspective and the trajectory of your day.
And your vitamin D, you can get some sunshine and fresh air.
I wonder, I wonder about all the other things too. Like and I haven't researched this, and you would need a grant and to spend all your time, but all of the medication that we're on, all of the medication that people take, all the pills that people pop, all the depression, the rates of depression and anxiety, screens, bad news. I just feel like if there's people talking about the human connection, how can these other things that we can't really quantify not possibly play into it? I just think it's so much.
Yes, you definitely need a multifactorial approach, and everything's included. So I love that you're including connections and friendships and relationships, because that's so important. And it's what a lot of us have missed over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Yonan Harari.
Harari?
Have you read his book, The Lost Connections?
No, is that a new book?
No, it was his, not the latest one, the one before that.
Okay, no, I haven't.
So it's just talking about our need for relationships, and without having community and connection, you've got a higher risk of an early death. Just not having that purpose and that connection. And it came out, I think, in 2020. So when most of the world was going down into lockdown, it was good timing to say, this is what we need, but this is what we can't have. So put it on your priority list for when you get out there.
And like something I listen to a lot of health podcasts and mental health podcasts, and something I hear mentioned, it sort of pops up, and I haven't really looked into this either, but you and I not being married, we don't have this problem, but sometimes I think, oh, like maybe I'm the person who's not connecting because I don't have this relationship. But being in a situation where you are denying your reality, where you're denying, I think we've all been in a situation or a relationship or a job, or we're lying to ourselves about what we like, whether we're happy, whether this is what we want. I think this, and whatever the reason is that you're lying to yourself, I think it's difficult to get out of a job or a relationship. So there's always a certain amount of time until you can face the reality. But, this is something that's very difficult to study, but it's something that's very pervasive. A lot of people living lives for the way that they appear, rather than living like their honest, true, real life, and being like, and having that coherence in themselves instead of that dissonance. And the times in my life where I have been lying to myself, perhaps about a relationship, those were very difficult times. And I can't imagine that is very healthy in the long term. And there are people living their entire lives like that. And so, and I've heard this mentioned, living a lie, lying to yourself. This is a very, very, very unhealthy thing to do.
Yeah. And other women live through their children, that they don't have their own life. Their life is living vicariously through their children. So yeah, so I have just seen the time. We can talk, can't we?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Anne-Marie. I think we've had a wonderful chat about dementia, and we've gone off on many different tangents. But if women want to connect with you, if they want to hear more from you, how do they find you?
So I'm Hot Flash Inc. across all social media. I have a podcast as well every Friday. I'm launching season 2. I've been doing solo episodes. I'm launching season 2 August 12th. And I have a weekly newsletter, a research letter. So it's free. It comes out on Saturdays. It's a roundup of research. It's fun things too, pop culture and everything. And I'm going to be launching, adding to that in September. I'm going to be launching like interviews and Q&As, and I'll probably charge for that, but the Friday or the Saturday one will always be free. So Hot Flash Inc. across everything, like hotflashinc.com, and on Instagram and TikTok. I'm over there too. There's quite a menopause movement happening over on TikTok.
I haven't gone there myself, but
Oh,
I will
don't.
take your
No.
word for it.
Don't, you'll lose all whatever free time you have left will be gone. So
No, I might keep my sanity in my free time then. But it has been wonderful to speak to you
wonderful.
today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye for now.